morning. Come on in. The coffee's good. That's coffee to you people who did not grow up in New York. So, anything happening lately? So I'm going to do a little experiment today. My site was flaky last night. I'm going to not swear. No cursing on this Periscope. I want to see if it makes any difference to the number count. Yeah, I've got a feeling that it might have been the cursing that took down my numbers last time, but we'll see. Can hear you well? Good. Alright, looks like we got plenty of people coming in. As soon as my coffee's ready, we'll chat. Yeah, I think the connection issues are going to be with some users all the time, no matter what. But as long as there's some people who have good connections, it means it's not a problem on my end. Yeah, it's a pretty big problem with Periscope, the connection problem. All right, so has everybody seen my blog post today? I just posted it. If you haven't seen it, we're almost up to 1,000. If you haven't seen it, I decided to endorse Donald Trump. I've changed my endorsement from Gary Johnson. If you don't know the history of my endorsements, I started out by endorsing Hillary Clinton because I live in California and it's not really safe to support Trump in California. I mean, it's physically not safe, and I mean that in a real way. So that worked for a while until Clinton decided that she was going to tax every dollar I earn from now on at 75%. That's because I already get taxed at about 50% at my income level. But in addition, she was going to tax my estate after I died another 50% or so. So that would be 75% of every dollar I earned would go to the government. So for that reason, I decided to change my endorsement to Trump for a while, but he got in trouble with his personal life and his woman issues. And so I retreated to Gary Johnson endorsement for a while. Because Gary Johnson only touches himself. That was my catchphrase. It just seemed like a safe place to be for a while. And I was also watching to see if his Access Hollywood scandal would take him down. Because it certainly would take anybody else down. There's nobody else who could recover from a thing like that. But what's happened is there's so much scandal fatigue that there's an ironic thing happening, that the more women who come out against Trump, the more it fades into the background, because you're losing track of which one was saying what, and you know that some of them are not true. You don't know if all of them are true or not true, but you know that some of them are not true. And so it looks like, and I swear this was not entirely predictable, but it wasn't a huge surprise, that people are actually getting used to it. There doesn't seem to be any scandal about Trump anyway, that people can't get used to, because it comes right down to they just still prefer him. no matter if every bit of that is true, people still prefer him. And the truth is that no one can pass the personal life test anymore. By the time you get to be 70, you've done so many bad things, sometime in that 70 years, that if people have recorded any of it, you're pretty much screwed. So, but here's what changed my mind. As I watched the people going over to Amazon.com, the Clinton supporters, and giving my books 1-star reviews, and even saying it's because I support Trump. They're not even saying they read the book. And that makes a big difference, because people do use the reviews to decide what to buy. But I'm also noticing that the social media comments people are making are just pure bullying. They're just trying to make it unsafe for people to have a dissenting opinion in this country. And most things don't bother me. I've got to say that I'm the sort of personality where that most things don't bother me. But bullying happens to be one of those things that does. And the Clinton side has gone full bully now. Everything is shame, mock, sarcasm, belittle. They try to belittle me, for my looks, my age, my sex life, my work. They're trying to bully me on every level you can. Now, I'm not saying that Trump supporters aren't doing the same thing to other people. But if they are, I'm not seeing it. But moreover, I think the bigger issue is that the Clinton side has made it morally acceptable to bully and even perpetrate violence against Trump supporters under the theory that they're so bad that what you're really fighting is Hitler. You're not fighting your own citizens who just want to, go to work and make the world a better place and have low taxes. You're not fighting against them. You're fighting against an actual Hitler, a dictator who's going to, make the world a terrible place. So that's what the Clinton side has sold to you. And they've done a really good job, persuasion-wise. It's A+. They've made you more afraid of Trump and his supporters than you are of the world just, going down the drain on its own, which is sort of the direction things are headed. I mean, things are always headed in that direction unless you're careful. So forget about the policies. I don't know who has the best policy for fighting ISIS. I don't know who has the best trade policy ideas. I don't know who has the best tax policy, except for that estate tax part, which is ridiculous. But I do know what bullying looks like, and I've got a real trigger for that. So for that reason alone, I've decided to support Trump, because I just can't be on the same side as the bullies. Just can't do it. And the bullies I consider my enemies now. So Clinton has done a good job of setting one part of the country against the other part. Something I would call the worst thing that any presidential candidate has ever done in the history of the United States, as far as I know. I'm not a historian, so maybe there's some worse things. But Trump is literally trying to say, hey, all Americans come together. And it's people who are not within our borders that don't get the same rights and protection. You can argue against that or for it, but it is a symbol of togetherness, at least within the country. Clinton's message, and the message of her supporters, is that half of the country, or at least 40%, the ones that support Trump, are deplorable, and that they're worthy of shame and even violence, and that if you rip the bumper sticker off their car and key their car for supporting Trump, you've actually done something good. That's the message you're getting from the Clinton campaign. And by the way, she could stop all of that if she wanted to. All she'd have to do is say, hey, we disagree with our policies, but if you're defacing Trump supporters' cars, you're not being American. She could say that. How easy would that be? She doesn't say that, because bullying is actually built into the strategy for winning at this point. Think about that. Think about how easy it would be for Clinton just to say once, you only have to say it once in public, I deplore the people who are defacing property on the other side. Let's have a civil debate. She could say that. That'd be easy. But the not saying it, and not saying it for this long, and in view of so many examples of where it's a problem, you have to say that it's part of the strategy, because to accept it at this level is clearly strategic. It's not oversight. So now, if you're wondering what is the persuasion angle here, and I know you do, bullying is probably more emotionally powerful as a concept than almost anything that anybody else is talking about. Because even nuclear war is a little bit conceptual. People think of nuclear war because they have seen movies about it, right? So it's one level away from reality. But almost everyone has been bullied, right? Bullying touches us at our core. And that's why I'm endorsing Trump, specifically because of the bullying. I can't be on the side of the bullies. And I've said before that the gun owners who are Republicans tend to use their guns for self-defense. The gun owners who are Democrats, and again, this is a gross generalization, I know, but they're far more likely to use it for crime or offensive use. So if you're looking at who's dangerous, it's the people using guns for offensive purposes, not the people who are trying to stop them. If you look at whose country you want to live in, Trump is saying that he wants to unite people under our flag and doesn't want to attack any other countries. That's about as peaceful and as peace-loving as you can get. Clinton is actually saber-rattling with Putin for no particular reason. I don't know what Russia's going to do to us, but if we piss them off, they could certainly do something. So you're talking about a massively dangerous candidate in Clinton, who's literally taunting the only nuclear power who could actually do something bad to us right away. And she's allowing her viewers, in fact, encouraging them indirectly, to be bullies against other citizens, their own citizens, other Americans. How un-American is it to turn Americans against each other? And based on confirmation bias, based on lies, based on persuasion, not based on anything that they've done. Sure, there are some racists in the Republican Party. I've never seen a poll on it, but I could imagine there are just as many racists on the other side. They just don't label themselves that way because they feel they're on the side of good for some reason. Why can't people say what you're saying? Well, people are not rational. So in my post, I said, I mentioned that before I'd said that Trump can't win unless something changes. And now I say that he has a 90% chance of winning. And I'll tell you what changed. I did. I decided that I'm all in now. Because I don't, as I said, I don't know what's the best policy for trade policy, taxes, how to fight ISIS. You and I don't know any of those things. You don't know, Clinton doesn't know, Trump doesn't know, the experts don't know. These are all pretty unknowable things. But I do know when citizens in this country have been turned against other citizens in this country. That part's obvious. All you have to do is put up a Trump sign in your lawn and see how long it lasts, depending where you live. In my neighborhood, it lasts about a day. So I can't support civil war. I can't support bullying. And those things we know to be true. The rest of the stuff, let's face it, you don't know who's going to be the best president. Neither do I, because we don't know which policies work. We don't know who can get what policies passed. We don't even know what the Senate and the Congress are going to look like exactly. So let's vote on the thing we do know. We do know that if we get bullied out of supporting a candidate, and if there's one candidate who's literally trying to turn part of the country against the other part, that's the most dangerous candidate the United States has ever seen. I hope you listened to Michael Moore's video. I tweeted it, or audio, in which he describes why Trump has an emotional connection to the country. Now, I understand that the audio was edited so that it left out the good things he said about Clinton and the bad things he said about Trump. So I think we all understand that to be the case. But the parts that were included in the audio are things he actually said. And he did talk about that deep emotional connection that Trump has with ordinary workers, because he offered to do something to keep, in Moore's example, to keep Trump in this, or to keep Ford from making cars in this country. He said he would put a huge tariff on them if they wanted to sell the cars in our country. So even Michael Moore was in favor of that, which I thought was pretty open-minded. And by the way, he's tried to sell a movie, an anti-Trump movie, a pro-Clinton movie. So he has reasons for doing what he's doing, but oh my God, he's a good persuader. You know, I'm not a huge Michael Moore fan, but I gotta say, he is one persuasive guy. Well, look at this. It's the most viewers I think I've had. I think once I got to 1.8 one day. Tisdale? Who's Tisdale? Trump is a bully, you say. Yeah, let's talk about that. I think Trump is a bully, but keep in mind that what he is offering, his proposition to the American people, is that he will be our bully. In other words, he will bully the other bullies. He will bully China. He will bully Iran. He will bully anybody that needs to be bullied. You notice he's not trying to bully Russia. You know why? Because they're not trying to bully us. And we don't really have a fight with them. In fact, we have more in common with them than we have reasons to fight, because ISIS is the bigger common threat. So Trump is absolutely a bully. And I don't defend anything he's done in his personal life. I don't defend anything he's done in his business life. But he is offering to use those bully powers, which I would call negotiating, if you want to take the emotion out of it. He's planning to do that for the benefit of American citizens. He wants to stand up against big corporations, big money interests, and Congress itself. So yeah, he's offering to be our anti-bully bully. He's offering to bully the bullies. So he's absolutely a bully. But look where he's directing it. Right? He's not directing it at ordinary citizens. You know, he's insulted people who are in the cage match with him. You know, people who are in the politics with him. But Clinton is going after ordinary Americans, people who just have an opinion that's different from hers. You know, she considers us deplorable, and she encourages her voters to shame those who are pro-Trump, no matter why they're pro-Trump. They might just like his tax policies, but still, she would have us shame him. Now, let's talk about Trump's woman problem and the Access Hollywood tapes. None of us support any of that. And I'm not going to dismiss it as locker room talk, because it's talk unless there are people who come forward and say, hey, something happened. But there are people coming forward and say, hey, something happened. My only point is that if you looked into the personal lives of any of these candidates, by the time they become 70-ish, there's a lot to hate in their personal lives. A lot. And you could really hate it for really good reasons. And I wouldn't dissuade you from hating either one of them for any of those personal life reasons. But if you're asking who's going to be the best president, we've seen plenty of examples from our past where their personal lives didn't matter to their job performance. Right? So if you're going to act in your own best interest, pick the person who's going to do the best job. If you're hiring a lawyer or a plumber, do you ask about their personal life? You don't, because you don't care. You mostly care if they can do the job. Trump is running for a job. Trump has been involved in the world's longest job application, if you will, or job interview. And I would argue he's actually been doing the job for a long time now, because the national conversation is really built around Trump at this point. I would say he's been doing the job of leading for a long time now. Let me give you an example. Although it's true that Trump's policy on immigration is getting a lot closer to Clinton's, and maybe they're the same at this point, he talks about extreme vetting. She talks about, we must vet very carefully, and we're good at it, and we'll get better at it. You could tell me there's a difference between those two things, but not much. But I'll tell you what is certain. Trump has already made it difficult for Clinton to do anything that looks like loose vetting, should she win, because he's put the focus on it. And so I would say that already Trump has caused whoever wins to vet more carefully by shining a light on it. In other words, leadership. Yeah. I wouldn't worry about Clinton reigning as a dictator. Yeah, the list of presidents who have been scoundrels is very long. Yeah, let's talk about terrorist attacks. Let me put this idea to you and just correct my thinking if there's something wrong with it. And stop me if any of my assumptions sound wrong to you, okay? I'm going to talk about terrorism here for a minute. I assume that ISIS has the capability to do some kind of attacks on the mainland whenever they want, because really it's just somebody with a high-powered rifle going to a public place and shooting a bunch of people. So there must be people in the country who can do that, or at least they could put people in the country in, a day and a half if they wanted to. So the fact that there has not been a terrorist attack lately, what does that tell you about ISIS's preference for president? Because if there were a big attack between now and Election Day, ISIS and everyone else in the world knows that it would benefit Trump. Right? Trump is more likely to get elected if there's a terrorist attack in the month before the election. The fact that ISIS has not staged any terrorist attacks, and not in Europe and not in the United States in the last month, am I right? At least nothing big. And for a while they were coming bang, 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 bang. Now ISIS has to do terrorist attacks because that's what keeps their brand alive, right? But why have they stopped? Have they stopped because we suddenly got better at it? Better at stopping them? Probably not in a month. But it's been a month of unusual quiet. All right? If there were attacks, it would benefit Trump. And ISIS knows that. They read the news. So why have they stopped? It's a preference. ISIS thinks that they'll have a better chance of thriving and surviving with the Clinton presidency. If they didn't think that, there would be attacks on the mainland right now. Now, it's possible that they're, I may be jinxing this, and it's possible they're waiting for the last week to do something big and make it a big deal. But if on Election Day, if you walk into the booth on Election Day, and there has not been an attack on the mainland, or even a big one in Europe, one of the big headline types attacks, anywhere in Europe, because they can do that at any time they want. What does that tell you about ISIS and who they want as president of the United States for their benefit? All right? I don't see any other way to interpret this. If ISIS can attack whenever they want, and not attacking now is good for Clinton, what do they want? ISIS do not control their territories. They're terrorists. They don't control all the terrorists, but they certainly could inspire them to attack now. All they'd have to do is say, hey, this is a good time to attack. Are they saying that? Michael Moore, we talked about him. Apparently that audio tape is edited and out of context because there are some bad things he said about Trump, which seems reasonable, and some good things he said about Clinton, which are not on the recording. And he's selling a movie, so you have to factor that into your persuasion. But it was very powerful. And Michael Moore did a really, really good job of finding the core of not only why people are liking Trump, but also what it is to be an American. That was the most pro-American rant that you're likely to hear. But again, it was out of context, so there may have been other context there. And the funny thing is that that Moore didn't really say that. He didn't say, hey, this is pro-American, America, America. It's just that if you listen to it, you know, the core of it, the actual heart of it was very American. Major property purchase in Qatar. What's that mean? Hillary's eye problem? I don't know. Is there something new in that? So notice that I'm not being limited. I'm not going to say the word that starts with shadow. You notice that that's not happening today. But I also didn't do any cursing today. So I'm seeing if that makes a difference. Because I know that Periscope does try to keep a G-rated service, which I support. I think that's a reasonable corporate goal. Oh, let's talk about Donald Duck. Oh my. If you haven't seen the latest Project Veritas video where you see the Clinton campaign operatives talking about their decision to get a big Donald Duck costume, or lots of them, and have them follow Donald Trump around, because they had decided that this has worked before in other campaigns, I guess. And having a duck would make sense, they said, because they're saying that Donald Trump is ducking on his tax policies. And according to the Project Veritas tapes, Clinton herself loved the idea and green-lighted it. Now, here are my thoughts on that in no particular order. Number one, how many Democrats do you have to put in a room before somebody points out that Disney, who owns ABC, is not going to be happy about having their child's lovable mascot co-opted into this symbol of hideous hate? Like, there was nobody at the table who said, I raised my hand. You know that Disney owns ABC, and we kind of need ABC to, push our story because they're pro-Clinton. Maybe we shouldn't try to ruin their business model just to get a Donald Duck mascot. So first of all, it shows the lack of sophistication in the people involved, that there wasn't one person who could see that connection. By the way, you put me in that room, my hand goes up as soon as that idea comes out. Right? I work in licensing, so it'd be a little more obvious to me. But really, there was nobody in that room at their ages and levels of experience, and even the candidate, nobody said, hey, let's not use Disney's intellectual property for this. Like, nobody thought that was a bad idea. Okay, so that's the first thing. Secondly, in terms of persuasive power, what you don't want to do is associate your opponent with one of the most lovable cartoon characters in the history of the planet. All right? Disney, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, these are literally, they have the most goodwill packed into these characters you could ever imagine. So from a persuader's point of view, the one thing you can be sure of is that Cialdini, who I call Godzilla, and there were no other cognitive scientists involved in this decision, because none of them are going to tell you to persuade. the public by making you think of a lovable cartoon character. Hey, when you think of Trump, think about all these things you love about being a child and these lovable cartoon characters who make you laugh. How about that for some persuasion, right? Nobody professional was involved in that decision. Professional, by that I mean no cognitive scientist, no professional persuader thought that was a good idea. And in the Project Veritas stuff, you didn't see them ever talking about, oh, we ran it by some persuasion experts and they liked it, because they didn't, all right? No persuasion expert would have let them finish the sentence, much less go ahead with dressing people in Donald Duck costumes and sending them out in public. Now, you did see, I think you saw, that in my case, the first time I even heard of this Donald Duck thing was on the Project Veritas tapes themselves. It had to be the biggest failure of all times because it, first of all, got no attention. And second of all, if it had gotten attention, it would have all been the wrong kind. Because people aren't smart enough to make this connection between, oh, Donald Ducks. Oh, and ducks is also a word for people who are avoiding things. And Donald Trump, wait, was he's avoiding? Oh, taxes, which people don't care about anyway. All right. So they picked the weakest argument, his taxes, and they connected it to a lovable cartoon character. And then they made the connection so weak that you have to do 3 mental leaps to get there. It's like, oh, Donald Duck, ducks. Ducks is the word for avoiding. Avoiding, what's he avoiding again? Oh, taxes. Donald Duck's taxes. I sort of get that. Worst idea ever. Okay. And remember, in the tape, they say that candidate Clinton, had green lighted that and thought it was great. Worst idea ever. Do you know which idea ended up working? Calling Trump a horrible, racist, homophobe, sexist. All right? So that came from professional persuaders. That came from people who do this for a living. People who know what persuades, because that works. They took your greatest fear and they branded Trump with it. You know, your biggest fear that you're surrounded by racists and homophobes and stuff like that. And they branded Trump. That worked. That worked really well. And in fact, that's why over the summer I said that Clinton went from having no game in persuasion, none at all. And this Donald Duck thing is a perfect example of a candidate who has terrible advisors and takes terrible advice. At least in this example, we can see that. Later, she had better advisors and took better advice. So if I'm being objective, she compensated for that and did a great job on it. And by the way, I would side with Trump, who gives her Clinton lots of props for being a good fighter. All right. So she made mistakes as they all do, but she did recover quickly. So her current persuasion game is really good. But it has also gone too far now. There was a danger with it. The danger of the persuasion game is that it left the field of politics and bled out into the public, which is what happened. All right. If you're branding Trump a racist and it's really about Trump, that's good persuasion, and I would argue it's not that different from any other campaign in its horribleness. But what happened was the Clinton campaign allowed this thinking to bleed out into the public, and it allowed her supporters to brand not just Trump, but anybody who might vote for him for any reason, even if they just like his tax policies or trade deals or whatever. If they vote for him for any reason, the problem is you, voter. The problem isn't the candidate anymore. All right. So once this horribleness of persuasion, this whole Trump is Hitler thing, bled from, hey, we're talking about the candidate. Let's avoid this candidate for the good of the country. And as soon as it became all of you deplorables are part of this problem, then it became civil war. All right. And has there ever been a candidate who made that big a mistake? Think about it. Maybe George Wallace, right? Has there ever been another candidate in the history of the United States who tried to turn citizens against each other? And maybe some of it was accidental. But at this point, it's not accidental because you can see what's happened. And it would be easy enough to say, hey, let's not make this personal. We're talking about the candidate. I'm not talking about the voters. We think all voters are, imperfect, but let's at least be on the same side. It'd be easy for her to say that, but she won't. Yeah, the nasty woman thing. I could imagine that there's a world in which Trump's nasty woman comment would have made a difference. But in this campaign, I don't think so. And the reason is because the women who would care about that kind of a comment and imagine that it's important, and he wasn't just using the correct pronoun to refer to someone who is not a man, all right, or not pronoun, but descriptor. If it had been a nasty man, if it had been Ted Cruz, I think he would have said he's a nasty man. It happened to be a woman, so he said she's a nasty woman. Like most of what Clinton has done, she takes something that is harmless and turns it into this horrible object of hatred, so that she can paint all Trump supporters as misogynists. All right. Now, if you want to live in a world where 40% of us are labeled misogynists and racists and horrible people, and you're okay living in that world, then Clinton might be a good choice for you. But if you don't like bullies, and you don't like a divided America, and you'd like to live in a country where people do things that don't always work, but at least we're trying to make things better, then I think you want to avoid the one who's trying to rip the country in half, and I would argue already has. All right, I think Clinton has treated the Constitution like one big piece of paper that she just ripped in half and just turned on the American public in a way I've never seen before. In fact, I can't think of any. It'd be hard to think of any public figure who has ever turned on the public like that. And again, I know she was going after Trump specifically, but once she let that bleed into the public, she gave cover, moral cover, for her supporters to be bullies. All right? And that's my trigger. I don't get triggered by policy. Not at all. I get triggered by bullying. And I think the bullies have to go away. Or be reformed, I hope. He is also a bully to people here. What would be an example of Trump bullying citizens, not counting individuals who are political, but citizens? I'm open to a counter-argument. Are we going to vote? No, I probably won't vote. Would you accept the results of the election if Clinton won? Let me tell you why that's a stupid question. All right, what makes a stupid question is if there's no alternate answer to it. All right. So would I accept the results of a Clinton victory? As a question, it's just a stupid question. Because if it looks fair, of course I would. If it looks unfair, of course I wouldn't. Can you tell me that anybody would answer that question differently? It's just a trick question. It's kind of like, do Black Lives Matter? It's just a trick question to get you to answer something that you can, take out of context later. So, well, I'll say that again. It's a stupid. I'm sorry, I don't want to swear on this. It's a stupid question. Will you support the election results before you know if the election results look reasonably fair, or if they look like the vote has been rigged? Remember, I've said that whenever you have a situation where humans are involved, and there's a big upside potential to doing something illegal or unethical. There's a lot to be gained. And you have the opportunity and a very small chance of getting caught and punished. Whenever you have that situation, there are always shenanigans. That's why the stock market has so many inside trading scandals. It's because there's a big upside, very low chance of getting caught, and humans are involved. Whenever you have that condition, you have shenanigans every time. We know in past elections there have been lots of small-scale shenanigans for the same reason. Big upside, not much chance of getting caught. Well, they did get caught. How many did not get caught? We don't know. But some did get caught. Do you remember them all going to jail? No, nobody went to jail. Instead, they said, hey, looks like I got a glitch in my software here. Well, look at that. That machine, you tried to vote a straight ticket of Republican, but it only changed that one, the one for president. I guess that's a glitch in the machine. Who went to jail? Nobody. Nobody goes to jail for a glitch. So you have a situation where there's really no chance of anybody going to jail for anything. Even the software programmer is going to say, I didn't put that in there. That was somebody else must have inserted that part of the code. All right. So you pretty much have no chance of being prosecuted unless you do something so terrible that it's just really, really big. And people don't have to do that. You could fix the election more easily. Now, here's the thing. The people who say you're being crazy when you say the election is rigged, because in all past elections, yeah, there have been small improprieties, but frankly, they probably go both ways. Some Republicans, some Democrats, and I think that's fair. And it's all been small scale. It hasn't been big enough to influence an election. Is that true? Was it true in Ohio when Kennedy won, and there's rumors that the mafia and the machine rigged the vote in the state that was most important for him to win? Was that the only election where that guy who has the election model that predicts who's going to win every time since 19 whatever, but he got one wrong in 1960? I may have my history wrong, but wasn't that when Kennedy ran? Is the only time that one guy who gets it right every time, the only time he was wrong is when the election was rigged? Is that the only time? Just asking. Now, here's what's different about this year. Here's what's different about this year. This is the first time that one of the candidates has given moral cover for massive vote rigging. Because remember, according to Clinton and her side and their persuaders, this isn't a regular election where you're choosing among two candidates and they just have different policies. That's not how they frame this. Clinton's side has framed this as a Nazi insurrection. And if you allow Trump to be president, you're siding with Nazis, with sexists and every other bad person in the world. In that environment, you've given moral and ethical cover for massive vote rigging. We've never had this situation before. We've had plenty of situations where people were passionate about their campaign being right and the other campaign being the bad choice. But we've always felt like we were Americans, right? And we've always felt like, yeah, I don't like that other candidate, but if that other candidate becomes president, I'm going to complain still because I voted, so I get to complain. But I'm going to accept that person as my president. That's really not the case this year. This time, anybody who can rig a vote has, again, massive upside potential, bigger than ever before. Because in the past, the upside potential was your candidate won. And maybe you got some political favors for fixing the race. Maybe there's some other personal benefits. But the big benefit was your candidate won. And you cared about that. And you were emotional about it. You were passionate about it. That's a pretty big upside. But imagine this year. That's not the equation anymore. It's not just that you like your candidate. Clinton has painted the other side as literally Hitler, like an actual Hitler-type monster who's going to take over the country. Now, if you have access to a voting machine and the ability to change the software, in this situation, don't you feel morally and ethically completely in the clear to rig the vote. You do. Let me personalize this. Let me say I'm the software guy. Let's say I know how to rig a machine. I don't, but let's say I did. Let's say I had the access to the software. Somebody does. Probably lots of people do. Let's say I have access to the software and I am a programmer. I can change it to change the vote in favor of Clinton, and I can do it in a way that's undetectable. Nobody's ever going to know. And I've been given the moral cover that stopping Trump isn't just choosing the better candidate. It's stopping an evil on the size of 1939 Germany. It's the biggest evil the world has ever known. What do? I would cheat. All right? You put me in that persuasion bubble, which I'm not in, right? For whatever reason, I'm exempt from seeing the world that way. So I'm not persuaded that Trump is a giant monster who's going to ruin the world. So I don't see it that way. But if I did see it that way, and a lot of people do, thanks to Trump's persuasion, if you give me the job of computer programmer in charge of the voting machines, I will change the code. I'll even put that in more positive terms. I'll say this as directly as possible. If I were ever in a situation where I thought one of the candidates was actually Hitler, like actually frickin' Hitler, if I believed that and I had access to the software in the voting machines, I would subvert American democracy for the benefit of American democracy. All right, I know we're a republic, but let's talk generically here. If you put me in that situation, I feel like I have the best interests of the country in mind at all times. All right, I'm just born that way. If it's not for the good of America, I'm against it. All right, just generally, I'm just against it. If it's not good for America, I'm against it. Even if it happens to be good for me, I'm usually against it. Because I've been brainwashed since birth to be an American, right? Pledge of Allegiance, salute the flag. Well, I'm good with all that. I realize it's brainwashing, but that's who I am now. I've been brainwashed that way. So if you put me as an American patriot, and I feel I am, if you put me in a situation where I could rig the election to prevent a monster from taking over the country, I'd do it. I'd do it as a patriot. I'd do it for the benefit of America. So that's our situation, folks. You've got people who are computer programmers who do have access to the software. And let's say half of them, maybe more, but at least half of them, are Clinton supporters. And if you're a Clinton supporter, you have probably been influenced by her messaging that Trump isn't just a regular candidate. He's the death of the world. And that programmer who has access to the code for the either the voting machines or for whatever counts the votes from the collective voting machines. I presume there are lots of points in the system of all these votes being aggregated where there's software involved more than once, right? So there are lots of places the software is involved. And there are lots of Clinton supporters who control at least half of that software. Maybe the other half as Trump supporters. But Trump supporters, keep in mind, they're just choosing the candidate they prefer. Right? In that situation, the person who has access to the software, if they just think this is a regular election and they're just choosing the preferred candidate, they're not going to risk anything to rig the election. Because, they prefer their candidate, but they're not going to risk their life and their livelihood and their family and all that to rig the election. There's just the gain is not that big. But if you're on the other side and you think it's the end of the world and a racist could come to office in the United States, you've got a big upside potential for cheating. So in that case, you do cheat. Some Trump supporters think it's the last hope for civilization. No, but I know they say that, but not in the same sense as electing Hitler. People are seeing there's some kind of slow decline happening that, they don't like. But the risk of a slow decline is not as activating as the risk of a monster. Those are completely different persuasion levers. How do we actually win this? I think you win it by talking to your Trump-supporting friends, or anybody leaning that way, and ask them how they like being bullied, how they like living in a country where one candidate is trying to divide you down the middle. How do you convince middle-aged white women to vote? You tell them that their sons are being treated as second-class citizens. You tell them that if you want their sons to grow up in a country where they can be bullied into voting against their best interest, go ahead and vote for the bully. But if you oppose bullies, you probably want the one who thinks we're all on the same team. You've converted several. If you weren't here in the beginning of the podcast, my blog today is about the Clinton team being bullies, not just the campaign, but the supporters. And bullying is a really activating thing. You don't have many chances to fight back against bullies, right? Usually the bully has got the power. That's why they can be the bully. When I was a kid, I had a few bullies, two in particular. One I beat with a club in the hallway of my school, because if you don't do it in public, it doesn't count. And he didn't bully me anymore. One I attacked when he wasn't looking. Actually, no, I take that back. That was a different story. One I attacked during recess when everybody could watch, and held him down and made him eat grass from the lawn. And he didn't bother me again. So I've got a hair trigger when it comes to bullies. I personally would rather die than be bullied, and I mean that literally. If I had a bully next door who was making my life, living hell because he was bullying me, I would kill him. I mean, I would actually take his life, because I would prefer that over the alternative. So bullying is kind of my last lever. All right, if you push that lever enough, there's nothing I'm willing to do. There's nothing I'm not willing to do to stop it, because I won't live under those conditions. There's a lot of conditions I'll live under. There's a lot of stuff that bothers me, but I can't fix that. I won't go do anything about it. But when I'm bullied, if there is something I can do about it, I'm going to do that. And there's nothing that's going to stop me. And I don't care what happens to me when it happens. You're watching it right now. Supporting Trump as I am will be disastrous for my business. It's going to cost me a fortune. All right. But I'm done being bullied. I'm just done. It happens to me every day. It happened to me in the press. You saw that Huffington Post, Salon, and the Daily Kos, they all ran simultaneous hit jobs on me today. That's all coming from the Clinton campaign. It's not a coincidence that they all did the same article on the same day. None of that's a coincidence. All right. So if you want to motivate people to vote, motivate them about bullying. Tell them that they can't put a Trump sticker on their car, that the bullies don't let them. But I also would encourage you not to wear your Trump hats or Trump shirts or even Trump colors on Election Day. Go invisible and just take care of the bullies. Don't give them bully food. Because if you wear your Trump stuff, I know it's going to feel good. I know it's going to feel good. You'll see all your other Trump supporters and wearing your hats. But there's going to be violence if you do. And that's not your deal. Violence isn't your thing. Violence is the thing you're trying to stop. All right? Yeah, I know. A lot of you Trump supporters are going to be strapped. That's the problem. All right? In a normal situation, the majority feels emboldened and they can chase down a few Trump supporters and beat them up. And we've seen that happen all over the place. But if you have enough Trump supporters visible, they're wearing their hats, and you know that some of them are armed, and you know that the bullies are going to attack some of them, because that's just what happens, somebody's going to take out a firearm. And it's going to be self-defense. And it's going to be a wet day. And you don't want that. That's the country that your bully master Clinton has created. A country where I would say there's a 75% chance that there will be rioting on Election Day. And none of it's going to be started by Trump supporters. None of it. Right? They may start it in the sense that wearing their red hats or red shirts might be inciting people to violence, but I don't think you can defend that. I don't think you can defend the violent ones over somebody's choice of hat. Do you think Obama let this happen? I think Obama is literally embarrassed. I think Obama is ashamed of what the Democratic Party became. If you listen to anything that Obama said when he was running for president, and by the way, I know this is an unpopular thing to say with so many Trump supporters listening to this. I think Obama was a very good president and will be rated in the top 20% at least, maybe higher. And I'll give you a little rundown on that, because that's sort of thing you can't say without explaining it. I think that he has consistently made his message about togetherness and nonviolence and about being better people. Okay, you can criticize his policies, but what he's said and what he's led has been about inclusiveness and being reasonably good people. Yeah, I know. I hear what you're saying. Yeah, he's been a badass in other countries, but we like that in our presidents. I also think that Obamacare is a huge success in failing, and it's exactly what he planned, because he said that. He actually said, I'm going to launch it ugly, because once the country gets a little bit pregnant, he didn't use those words, but that's, in essence, he was saying that, they'll have to keep giving health care to the people who got covered, because you can't take health care away. It's the sort of benefit that once you have it, you can't take it away. So he got people covered. The plan was a mess, just like he probably knew it was. And now you have both candidates promising to fix it, but no candidate promising to cover fewer people. So he broke it just the way it needed to get broken. He may never be recognized for that. It was probably the single biggest piece of genius in his presidency, and it will always be recorded as a mistake, even though he told you publicly what he was doing. He actually said, I'm going to design this wrong because I don't have the option of designing it right. I can't get that passed. But once it's out there, it's going to get fixed. That wasn't gutless. That was very gutful. All right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I told you I'm endorsing Trump. But the fact is, Obama is a genius. You can hate it. You can hate me for saying it. But he did some really smart things. All right. Evil genius? I don't think so. I don't think giving people health care is evil genius. Yeah, I told you it's a big mistake, Obamacare. But it's the mistake that he did intentionally, because it was the only path to getting something better. Break it and fix it. So was Hitler. Yeah, his Muslim appeasement, as you call it, probably did keep us a little bit safer, because it made it harder for anybody else, at least for 8 years, to say that we were the anti-Muslim country, because as far as the other countries knew, we had a Muslim as a president for a while there anyway. Obama destroyed race relations? No. I'm stupid. Yeah, I think all the pro-Muslim stuff is all defensible except for immigration. Because immigration, I think you can treat that as a separate question. And I would say that he's not winning on immigration. So yeah, that would be a mistake. You know, you can't blame everything that goes wrong on the sitting president. I'm not arguing with any of the things that went wrong under his presidency. I'm just saying when you sum it all up, he's going to, I think historians will put him in the top 20% of presidents. He race baited. I'm just reading your comments. After saying what I did, I expect to get some hate going here. Now, I know you can disagree with that. There's plenty of fodder for you to disagree with my point. I'm just telling you that if you were to look at it objectively, and historians will, not right away, but it'll take a while, I think they're going to look at him as the top 20% president. Well, compare Obama to Clinton. Clinton has divided the country. I didn't see Obama doing that so much. I mean, people hated him, of course. Alec Baldwin. What about the debt? So here's the thing with the debt. Let's talk debt. So when people talk about the debt, there are two things that are true, and the people who take one side say one of the things is true and ignore the other one, and the people who take the other side say the other thing is true and ignore the second truth. So the first truth that's right is that America can handle, and handle it well, an enormous debt, right, for a variety of reasons. One, we're the most debt-worthy country, and two, we can print money if we need to. It causes inflation, but we have ways to inflate away some of our debt if we need to. But the other truth is you can't do that forever. There is some level where the debt will crush you. Now, I don't know where that level is. It might be where we are, but probably not. Economists don't seem to think so. But we're definitely heading in a direction where if it went that way long enough, we would be crushed. So when we're talking about the debt and we say, oh my God, he ran up trillions in debt, it's all true and we wish that hadn't happened. But it was in response to a specific economic meltdown and probably worked, meaning the stimulus probably made a difference. It probably created some confidence and it worked. Now, if he did the same thing forever, it would stop working. But temporarily, it was exactly the right thing to do, and it's one of the reasons that I suspect that Obama will be seen as a top 20% president by historians someday. So when people talk about the debt, they just look at one thing. They either say, debt will kill us. That's true, if there's enough of it. And then the other side says, there's no problem with debt. And that's also true right now, because we can pay the debt that we have. We are financially pretty strong. But what's also true is we're heading in a direction, we don't know how quickly, where the debt will be too much, and then we've got a big problem. Debt equals slow death. Yes, if things proceed in a straight line. So one of the reasons that you might prefer Trump is that he's the bigger change agent, probably. And you probably need to get the lobbyists out of the decisions in order to do anything with the budget that helps. And you probably need to spur a lot of private investment to lower health care with new innovations and that sort of thing. And Trump's probably more entrepreneurial. Maybe he could do more of that stuff. So the only way civilization will work in the long run is that there are big step-like changes that change the nature of how we live. But there is no solution where we just fix the budget, because that can't be done. The ransom guy who lies. Yeah, you could say everything you say about Obama, is true or true-ish. All the criticisms you have are true or true-ish. But it's also true that he didn't start any new wars. He did guide the country through its biggest economic problem since the Depression. He didn't make people, he didn't turn the country against each other. People turned against Obama, but they didn't turn against each other because of what he was doing. And I think that by putting on Obamacare in its bad form, and it's certainly bad, he did the smartest thing you could do, because he's forcing people to fix it. So it'd be hard not to give him credit for those things. He didn't start Syria. Iraq started Syria. Trayvon Martin. Well, I think that Obama has consistently been on the side of no violence and, let's all be good to each other. You could argue that his specific examples of that you don't like. The Trayvon Martin thing maybe you don't like. But I would argue that you don't want your president to be on any other side except against violence. Even the Washington Post admits that Obama escalated ISIS. Here's what's the problem with that. Who was the other president who was doing other things at the same time that Obama was allegedly making things worse in Syria? The answer is there wasn't one. You can't compare what one person does in a vacuum and say, compared to nothing, he did a bad job. There was no alternative. All you know is what happened. You don't know that what he did made it worse. You do. There's no evidence for that. All you know is he was president and something got worse. Guess what? Some things got better too, and he had nothing to do with those either. All right? The fact is that some things get better and some things get worse, and it's almost never the president's fault. Because I'll tell you what wasn't going to happen in the Middle East. It was all going to heal itself. All right? Why did he meet with Creamer? I'm sure it wasn't for good reasons. All right. I didn't vote for Obama, no. I didn't vote, actually, in case you're wondering. Or did I? Did I vote? No, I didn't vote in that election. All right, I think I'm going to get off and go do something useful now that I've made everybody angry. All right, see you guys, read my blog, do what you need to do.